To touch the warp is often to invite destruction, insanity, or, for those unfortunate enough to find their very being infested with the demonic forces of chaos, to court possession. The Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus swear their honor to the rooting out and eradication of all such chaos taint from the mortal plane. But there are those within the Inquisition who employ more radical means than many among even their order can accept, believing that their planned ends will justify their dark methods. The Exorcist Space Marine chapter was created during the 13th founding, sometime between the years of M35 and M36. This particular founding is sometimes referred to as the Dark Founding, due to the records of chapters created during this period, unlike during most other foundings, being lost. Whether this was done purposefully, or if it came about through a lack of record keeping is unknown. While the lineage and origins of the Exorcists have been classified by an imperial bull, originating from the Inquisition and the High Lords of Terra themselves, the chapter is ultimately believed to have been forged from the gene seed of the Imperial 5th Space Marine Legion. It's unknown if the Exorcists took on their name before or after they had been given the task of hunting demons. However, it is known that they were active for a time before they would begin to specialize in the field of combating the denizens of the warp. It was, in fact, only after the Exorcists would face the demons of Tessinich in battle that they would gain the attention of the Ordo Malleus. This occurred when the Exorcists would be tasked with the liberation of Totem 5, a planet that would prove to be under the demonic domination of the Lord of Change, Kariath the Shrouded. During their confrontation with this demon, the Exorcists would display an unusual resistance to the warp and sorcery that would infuriate the creature. In his frustration, Kariath would resort to attempting to possess the first chapter master of the Exorcists, a Marine known as Enoch Trismegistus. Unfortunately for Kariath, the warp energies that the demon would pour into Enoch would only awaken his latent psychic potential. Enoch would then go on to use his newfound abilities to resist Kariath for just long enough to use telepathy to contact his loyal chief librarian Goetus. With the aid of Goetus, Enoch would force Kariath from his mind through a combination of sorcery and sheer force of will. The Exorcists, led by the freed Enoch, would then go on to purge Totem 5 of Tessinich's remaining taint. Interestingly, though the Imperial Fists and those of their genetic line have always displayed a notable loyalty to the Imperium and steadfastness in the face of corruption, the Exorcists seem to display an unusual level of resistance to chaos even for their genetic lineage. Whether this was through a mutation in their gene seed, either intended or not, is not known due to the lack of information that has been allowed to be disseminated regarding their origins. Regardless of how this initial warp resistance would come to be, the subfaction of Inquisitors known as the Plutonians would take notice of it, and upon learning that Chapter Master Enoch had been possessed by a demon of greater power, would quickly move to interrogate the man. Enoch would be relieved of his command, while the Plutonians established a field office on his chapter's home planet of Banish. The Inquisition would interrogate Enoch in a long series of questionings that would span the course of months. It was through these sessions, and likely the use of psychic and spiritual probing, that the Inquisitors would eventually come to agree that the Chapter Master was free of Chaos Taint. They would also discover that the Chapter Master had developed an even stronger resistance to the warp, which would lead them to theorize that he'd be even more resistant to chaos in the future than he had been prior. Upon revealing this to Enoch, the Inquisitors would also reveal that this had been their initial suspicion all along, and that now that it was confirmed, that they had an offer to bring to the Exorcist chapter. The Plutonians suggested that they could provide the Exorcists with the training and assistance necessary to repeat Enoch's inoculation against chaos. Enoch, who had grown greatly in intelligence after his possession by the demon of Tessinich, would see the merit and possibilities of such a suggestion and would agree to their proposal. Sometime following this, Enoch would be reinstated as chapter master of the Exorcists, and the first of his followers would soon after undergo the Inquisition's trials of possession, in which a hopeful Exorcist aspirant would be purposely made the host of a minor daemon before, if they had not managed to banish the demon from their mind by force of will alone as Enoch had, they would then be exorcised by a trained Inquisitor after 12 hours. The Space Marines that survived these trials, and that were not horrifically mentally or physically damaged, would then go on to be trained by both the Inquisition's demon hunters themselves and the mysterious Grey Knights, who were Space Marine demon slayers themselves, derived from the Emperor's own gene seed, of which among their number none had ever fallen to chaos, despite regularly being tasked by the Imperium with facing the worst the Immaterium had to offer. The Exorcists would be taught demonology, exorcism, and further methods of fortifying themselves against the warp by these experts on the Neverborn. When a sizable and educated force of Exorcists had been fully established, they would then be tested by being sent to cleanse an unknown demon world in the northern sector of the galaxy. During this mission, the Exorcists would perhaps exceed expectations and prove incredibly capable at combating chaos. Their trials at the hands of the Inquisition would leave them practically invisible to the warp side of both demons and psychers, and also make them incredibly resistant to all but the strongest of their sorceries. And, while even the greatest of Space Marines would be at risk on a daemon world, the Exorcists would prove to have only a 1% chance of being repossessed in such a place, much lower than the risk posed to an average Astartes. In the end, for every Exorcist Space Marine killed, many hundreds more daemons would be slain. And, although a squad of Grey Knights had been sent to watch over the Exorcists, to ensure that the worst-case scenario of the majority of them falling to chaos did not occur, the Knights would instead report that an intervention had not been necessary at all. Following this success, the Ordo Malleus would go on to form a very close relationship with the Exorcists, granting them the right to restrict space travel entirely in the quadrant of space surrounding their homeworld, and even going so far as to establish various inquisitorial research facilities on Banish itself. With all of this being said, the Exorcists do incur a number of risks through their almost heretical use of willingly becoming daemon hosts, even if only for a short time. Nearly every successful Exorcist bears either some marking or form of mutation from the possession, and although most of these can be covered up by cosmetic surgery, those that cannot are carefully hidden from the Imperium at large, in fear of drawing the attention of the more puritanical factions of both the Inquisition and Terran-based bureaucracy. Most Exorcists also experience a rapid increase in the levels of adrenaline produced in battle, along with an extreme lowering of the stress hormone serotonin, leading to an incredibly aggressive and forceful tendency towards hunting chaos. Notably, however, members of the chapter do seem to return to the more baseline calmness unique to the Sons of Rogel Dorn when outside of battle. What is more unique to every Exorcist Space Marine, however, is that they also tend to develop certain personality traits that are related to the demon that possessed them during their neophyte trials. An Exorcist possessed by a demon of Khorne may make for a more violent, combat-minded Marine, while a demon of Tetznich may create a paranoid but yet tactical one. Regardless of the severity of their mental or physical changes, nearly no successful aspirants rise to full brotherhood in the chapter without suffering some permanent and lasting change to their personhood that seemingly goes beyond even the invasive changes forced upon all Astartes. However, those Exorcist aspirants who fail to mentally survive the experience of possession, but who do not become outright uncontainable chaos spawn, are instead used as vessels for the various demons that the Inquisition either seeks to contain permanently, or later use in future Exorcist initiations. Referred to as Broken Ones, these poor souls, while not coming out of the Inquisition's trials entirely whole, do still gain a resistance to chaos that allows their bodies to hold and better seal multiple demons at once. The imprisonment of demons within Broken Ones allows the Exorcists to keep the Neverborn involved with their rituals from spreading whatever secrets they may have glimpsed from a neophyte's mind, along with better containing them and preventing them from causing further damage to real space. However, as it was deemed entirely irresponsible to house these living demon prisons on the planet of Banish itself, the Exorcists and Inquisition instead established and produced a prison craft known as the Purgatome. The Purgatome thus wanders space without end, its location being known to very few, with its residents posing a combined risk to galactic safety, perhaps very rarely seen even in the Imperium of mankind. Though very few failed aspirants have ever managed to escape, during one particularly dark period in the chapter's history, an inquisitor by the name of Cardinal Rodrigo Nesson was driven mad by witnessing the trials of possession undertaken by aspirants. Due to his chaos-influenced madness, Rodrigo would come to believe that the mutated and possessed Space Marines represented the future of humanity's evolution. Because of this, Rodrigo would plan and execute an escape, bringing with him a series of failed aspirants that would come to forge the Swords of Epiphany, a chaos warband sworn to the service of the Immaterium by the corrupted Cardinal himself. It would later only be through the dogged determination of the Exorcist battle captain Vayan Armadale that Rodrigo and the Swords of Epiphany would be hunted down and clashed with across the galaxy, before being whittled down to the last man and promptly purged from real space proper. The Exorcists would also again later prove their merits, when they stopped a chaos rebellion on the cardinal world of Dimamar. Dimamar had been slowly drained of its military resources by the Imperium, who sought to use them to fight other conflicts in the region. Eventually, a demonic entity, known as the Horned God, would rise to power and reveal itself as a demon prince who had orchestrated the troubles on Dimamar and the surrounding worlds. The Exorcists, along with an Ordo Malleus strike team, would fight their way into the Horned God's lair of an ancient pre-human ruin, and the librarian Malachite would then slay it by piercing its heart with his force spear. It was only through the sacrifice of a full third of the Exorcist numbers that the Horned God was put down, but their actions would ultimately free Dimamar and the entire surrounding sub-region of space from the influence of chaos. The Exorcists would also save the small frontier world of Stonecrow from a minor Tyranid incursion when a small detachment of Exorcists heard the planet's pleas for help after being driven out of the warp jump by the Tyranid's disruption of the Immaterium. The Exorcists would slay multiple Void Krakens in the openness of space before sending down Marine brothers to wipe out the Gene Stealers on the planet's surface. The Exorcists would also fight successfully in multiple Black Crusades, among other major conflicts against Chaos and other threats to the Imperium across real space. Among the chapter's greatest warriors and heroes of these conflicts include the aforementioned chapter master Enoch, the librarian Malachite, and their current chapter master, Silas Alberek, who has been noted to have an Ogren-like stature and to have slain the chaplain of the traitorous Astral Claw Space Marines in single combat, despite already being grievously injured beforehand during the Badab War. Additionally, there was the librarian Sabazus, who was known to be able to directly attack and destroy the souls of his enemies in the warp, an incredibly rare ability which would seemingly make him a threat to even the generally immortal demons of the Immaterium. Sabazius would, however, go missing after being loaned to the Deathwatch chapter. Thanks to the perhaps somewhat unorthodox and possibly even heretical methods of the Plutonians, the Exorcists have proven to be a valuable tool in the fight against chaos. Protected by the ancient art of anchoring one's mind embodied through knowledge, and the use of historic runic wardings, likely gifted to them by the Grey Knights, and with their chaos resistance being further reinforced by their trials of possession conducted by the Ordo Malleus, these specialized Space Marine demon hunters have become as close to the perfect tool for combating the ruinous powers as is possible, before, of course, one enters into the domain of the rare and shockingly incorruptible Grey Knights. Chanting dark languages and high Gothic litanies in battle, while employing the various occult teachings and knowledge of the Inquisition, the Exorcists provide an effective stopgap bridge between regular Space Marine chapters and the gene-seed sons of the Emperor himself. Recently, the Exorcists have further increased their strength by beginning to employ an elite Primaris Marine vanguard. When the resurrected Primarch, Brute Gilliman, would send the Primaris Marines, Space Marine reinforcements that had been strengthened by the Tech Priests of Mars, the Exorcist's gift to Primaris soldiers would be attacked before they could ever reach Banish. Even the Custodes escort that would travel with the Primaris reinforcements would remark that the warp's seeming determination to prevent the enhanced Marines from reaching the Exorcists was perhaps an ill omen. In the end, every Exorcist Primaris sent by Gilliman would be slain by chaos, but the Custodes would successfully hand-deliver the method by which the Exorcists themselves could create their own Primaris. This would suit the Exorcists just fine, however, as it meant that they could create Primaris Marines that would be raised through their own secretive processes of indoctrination. These future Primaris Marines would be put to shocking effect eventually, proving a fierce force of fighters that would only be further enhanced as demon hunters by the processes of deliberate exorcism. This being said, other Space Marine chapters would later remark, upon fighting alongside the Exorcists, that the Primaris of the Exorcists were much more prone to mood swings and illogical decision-making than other Primaris. Other than the elite Primaris vanguard though, the Exorcists also further segment themselves into unofficial cults known as Orisons. These warrior lodges seek to study particular fields of knowledge and allow the chapter to call upon experts in various topics whenever needed. Some of these Orisons house the elite warriors of the chapter, such as the Enochian Guard, while others focus instead on the study of warp sorcery or demonology. None of the Orisons are exclusive to one another, and particularly old and decorated Marines may be revered members of multiple Orisons at a time. Exorcists denote their Orison membership in various rank structures through the use of their armor coloration and regalia. The average Space Marine of the Exorcist dons power armor of a red coloration with a black trim, while veterans of the chapter often trim their armor instead with white and wear bone-colored helmets to signify their seniority. Whereas the Terminators of the Enochian Guard forgo this and instead stay true to their red color scheme, rather choosing to don black shoulder guards as their mark of skill. Specialized units denote their duties further on their right shoulder pauldrons, with squad numbers being superimposed over them in High Gothic. Finally, a Marine's company is designated by the color trim of their shoulder guards, and the Exorcist's current sigil is a bone-white, horned skull on a red background. In the end, the Exorcists are a highly specialized group of Space Marines, forged by the Ordo Malleus into demon hunters via means of possession, rather than the more esoteric and pure methods employed by the Grey Knights and their use of an incorruptible, but rare and hard to source gene seed. And while the Exorcists currently boast a very successful track record, whether the touch of the demonic upon their beings will ever come back to haunt the chapter remains to be seen.